So you're going to have some in-class project time, and you will be meeting with me or Abdul to review your project progress. So we can, get you all situated as you head into the weekend. Next Tuesday, we'll do an intro to Redux. If you weren't using Use Reducer previously, then, saying I'm going to work with Redux isn't as practical as you might think, because Redux is also using Use Reducer, the concept. So if you're not doing that, or you're not implementing context right now into your app, then Redux would be a lot to try to just shove into your app. But we'll cover it so you can understand that ecosystem. One of the big, tools in that ecosystem is Redux. And then final project presentations. We'll do final project presentations, end of course survey. We'll fill that out in class. We'll wrap up, see next steps. If you're interested in doing more, taking more classes at GA, answer some of those questions. We'll do exit tickets, and then that should wrap it all up for us. Okay, so we don't have a lot of classes left, nor a lot of time for the a little behind and the danger zones. We got to get you back on track. So think small and big, build out. All right, that was part of the architecture and all that stuff. So applying CSS and using CSS files and inline styles. Okay, so you did read that article, right? This really basic article, styling 4 different ways, using style sheets. Zoom in a little bit. Using style sheets, and that's really what we've been doing up to this point, right? Everything we've done really for the most part has been just a CSS file, okay? And you import the CSS file, and then you have access to all of the CSS that's needed. You can apply it anywhere. And you use class names and or IDs and or DOM element names like main, section, header, footer, things like that, right? That's easy enough. Just requires that you understand how to write CSS. That's really what it is. A lot of front-end developers must know how to do CSS and do it effectively. Back-end developers usually don't really care. Their stuff is just not pretty to look at, but there's a lot of stuff happening under the hood. They're writing a lot of code just to support the application. And then there's inline styles. So when we're doing inline styles, the difference between inline styles and doing it in CSS is that inline styles, the key is camel cased. So here's text align. Text align center, text align is camel case. It is not, I take a look over here, it is not separated by dashes. So in normal CSS, the CSS with 2 names in it would be separated by dashes. And here it's not, it's camel case. Also, the other thing to note is a normal CSS, you would just write, say 15 pixels, no quotes around it, right? There's no quotes around any of these, right? But here in the JavaScript, we do include, here we're just putting single quotes, but you do put quotes around that, those values, okay? So almost everything here has quotes around it. And we're creating just an object, and then the object is applied using style. So adding styles is as easy as just doing this. Style is equal to curly brace, and then you render an object, okay? We could have written these inline styles also manually. I could have taken margin 40 pixels and put it in here, but I would have to add an additional pair of curly braces. I'm gonna demo how that looks, okay? I just kind of wanted to get an overview of the 2 most basic ways. We're not gonna jump into CSS modules. But these are kind of the 2 basic ways. So I'm going to take a look at doing just that. So let me go back here. Let me, I also have another good article here, but let's take a look at doing this. So I'm going to code along this little light switch. So I think I took, this might have been, one of the solutions from the light switch. This was when we were doing, does anybody remember what this was, the intent of this was? Remember what we were implementing with the light switch?
Use reducer?
Use reducer, yep. And this was actually, Gustavo, your solution, by the way. Gustavo's solution to use reducer here, right? Okay. So I'm just going to go here and, take a look. Here's our initial state of values. We're doing, and I'm just kind of showing it to show use reducer again. So it's not like we only did it once. We never really went back to it. It's not something we're going to apply everything that we learned continuously throughout the class. You introduce it. Maybe we'll get back to it. Maybe we won't. But this is an easy one to kind of implement styling with. And so we had use reducer, and use reducer was meant to, can anyone kind of verbalize why we would be using use reducer? Just as a small review. What was the intent of use reducer? From the exit ticket feedback, I got some statements where it was like, I'm not sure how to use it, why we're using it.
It implements a re-render on multiple objects of an array.
Okay, so it implements a re-render multiple objects on an array. So you're saying we could update state and cause a re-render?
Yes, multiple times based off of the values of an array.
Got it, multiple times. Well, if we update state once, that triggers the re-render, right? So anytime we do the use reducer, we call it, we're really only calling it one time. It's almost as though we are doing the set state method once. So when you call use reducer, you're executing only one of these case statements. In this case, there's only one case for reset, and there's kind of a default case that does something else. At any point in time, we are only rendering one of those. That's all we're doing. So this really only runs one time. Anyone else having another explanation?
I would probably say that it's, and I'm trying to word this correctly.
Sure.
It's kind of like you're putting all of the different ways to modify the state in one place, and then you can just call one value, like a string or something, you can call it a method with a value to just do that, whatever you told it to do in the switch statement.
Yes. Yeah, I would say, in a nutshell, that explains it, where the use reducer is meant to aggregate all of the logic that would have mutated state. Before we would have these individual methods, right? A method that's like handle delete, handle submit, handle update, and all of these methods would have been written down here somewhere, and we would be calling those methods, and each one of those methods would have a update state in some way. This dot set state, or if we were using use state, some sort of update the thing, right? Whatever it is. And that works. That's easy for us to kind of work with. I mean, we've been doing that for a while. What use reducer does there, now remember, if I was looking at your code and I saw a couple of state values, and then I saw a bunch of methods, I'd have to follow it down to be like, all right, let me take a look and see where the handlers are being sent to and what's being executed and what's being updated. And it might take me a moment to kind of look through the code to see the things. But with a use reducer, I can look at a case and make a distinction on what is actually triggering the update, right? So I can aggregate all of the application logic for that component that requires state and aggregate it in such a way that when I see the case statements, I actually see what's triggering the update in state. Okay, so it's just a way of aggregating. I can still have the supporting methods. I can still call those methods and pass them values. That's fine. You could still do that. But this allows us to aggregate the logic of your application. And as you're logic in your application starts to grow and grow, I, as another developer, can come over and be like, oh, you're using user reducer. Cool. So all I have to do is follow these case statements here, and I can actually determine what your app is doing. There's a reset. Awesome. There's a low, medium, high, which we don't have here, but when we had done it, I was doing it with low, medium, high. You'd be able to understand that. Okay, that's the difference. Use reducer is a little bit more complicated than just using state, right? Use state adds a little bit more complexity, but at the same time, in the end, it should allow developers to look at your application and know by looking at this what's happening. Okay? That's really what it is. This is business, your kind of business logic is happening here. All right. Let's just use reducer. All right. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to select this out. I didn't select it out. You wanted to code along. That's cool. So I'm going to go here. Here's our CSS. So in a nutshell, if we really wanted to kind of add styles, like all of these styles now are coming from the CSS file. And the CSS file was imported where? An index. Index is importing the CSS file. Okay? App doesn't have any CSS file, and nor do these other two have any specific CSS files. So we could spin off additional CSS files to aggregate this, because once again, this is only 32 lines, but in all honesty, large CSS files could be hundreds of lines. So if anyone's worked with CSS, you know that CSS can be really crazy. And if you want to start making edits, you have to go down to line 955 to make a single edit, right? And that requires that you scroll down or you search. Really tedious process. So sometimes spinning off a separate one might make it easier. So I'm just going to take a look here and see, there's a reset button. Where's the reset? I think the reset's in controls, right? So if I take a look here, here's the reset. It's a button. It has a class name of reset, right? So it has a class name of reset. So I could do two things. I could take this class of reset, right? I could go here and create a new file and maybe do controls.css. I could do that. I could go here and take this, right? I could copy it, comment it out, put it in controls, CSS right here, right? I could put it in there and then just go to controls and then import, right? Import controls.css, right? I can import controls.css, right? There's not a whole lot of CSS going on here. It's just margin bottom, right? And if I get rid of this, what if I increase this to be margin bottom, 50 pixels, pushes it down, right? I just want you to see that this is actually happening, right? So that's one way. You could separate these into separate files. If you're going to do that, then what I would do is create folders that contain those components and their corresponding CSS. I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't start having a light.css file sitting in the same components folder. Everything is in one. It's not organized. And after a while, it's going to get confusing. So I would go here and maybe create a controls folder and then move controls into that, move control CSS into that, and they become this self-contained thing, right? It's one way to do that. Also, say I get rid of this. Say I don't want to do the file, but I want to import it. So if we're here, we could easily import styles. I could say something like let style is equal to. Okay, I'm just going to grab this style here, margin bottom. I take margin bottom and I add it here. Now, we have to use camel case. It's already screaming at me right here, saying you can't do that. So we have to do margin bottom. Okay, now it's screaming at me with this. It doesn't understand what to do with that. So we have to put that in single quotes. And we got to get rid of this semicolon because that's CSS syntax. That's not JavaScript object syntax. Okay, and now we got rid of it. Okay, if we wanted to add more styles, we'd have to add a comma, and then we could add as many additional styles as we want. Maybe we want to do color, I don't know, red. So we could reset it this color to be red. Now here, where we have a class being assigned to this, we don't necessarily need classes anymore. Not in this particular instance, because we have all the styles here. So I could get rid of this class name of reset. We don't need that. And all I have to do is say style is equal to, and in curly braces, say style. Or maybe I'll call it styles, right? I still could call it styles. And now we have it, okay? And that's easy enough. Now, if I didn't create or pre-create this object, say I didn't pre-create the object, say I wanted to really write true inline styles, well, I would need to put 2 curly braces and then do that, okay? You need the second pair of curly braces because what style takes in is an object. It needs to be an object, okay? So I just can't do this. I can't be like, all right, well, I have that, so let me just do this. That's going to break it, okay? So if you're going to add styles like this, double curly braces for styles. Now, once again, I would prefer to create the styles object. You can call that whatever you want. It doesn't have to be called styles, right? I called it styles, but I could easily say, you know, my styles. I could say, hey, my styles, and then go back here and say my styles. It's not relevant to the naming convention, whatever you decided to call it, right? Maybe I'll call it button styles, okay? So this is the other way to kind of do it as well. Now, we could have put in here logic too. This could contain actual JavaScript logic. We could create a function here that would return red or true. I could say something like this. I could say, let's see, get rid of this. And I'm going to say, actually here, I'm going to say if it's true, right, I'm just going to use some logic, then return red, else return green. Now you see how it turns red. So what if I was to change this? Not true, I'm going to say false, right? I'm going to use Booleans. Now it's green. Do you see how it changed? The color here changed from green to red, depending on this logic. So you can actually use this object to contain additional logic based on values that are coming down. And if it was ever reset, we could say, hey, they clicked on the reset, reset is 0, something like that, right? Or it's green, but every time you click on this number, if this contains a value, right? So we could possibly say something like, I know, number of clicks, props.clicks. So if we actually say, you know, maybe we say props, here we go, props.click, right? That's going to return a number, 0 being that number. So if it's 0, true, right? So 0 is always evaluated as false, right? So if it's not 0, so how about this? If it's not 0, it's true, but if I do this and I do this, it should have reset it. Oh, this actually has to rerun. So we'd actually have to rerun this. I don't think it's passing it down. But we can evaluate that logic, okay? If I actually wanted this to rerun, I'd have to have like, put this in a function. I'd have to do something like this and cause it to rerun. Nope, nope, nope. Can't do it. Maybe I can't do this. Okay, we're not going to do that. So I want to show that that's versatile in that way. Now, a much more robust example is this other article that I had come across as I'm writing. I've been writing a Medium article for the last couple of days. The Medium article is, I'll just show you the Medium article, 4 ways to implement responsive design in your React app. I'm hoping to get this done by like Thursday. I'll post it, Slack it out to the group. And so I obviously did some research for that. I found one where it's doing inline styles. And so for that, he does something like this. You see these styles? Where there's an actual function here, right? This function is setting opacity equal to 1 by default, but it would return back whatever the opacity that is given here, Okay, and so with this in mind, we could go down and assign opacity. Let me see where he assigns the opacity. Margin right, margin right. No, didn't assign it yet. When he does assign it, he just calls style.white and he passes in a particular value. Okay, and then that would be kind of like this, what we did with the light switch, right? The light switch was a lot of, RGBA, and then we hard-coded, at least for the majority, we hard-coded that. Some solutions came back where you were just passing in that single value, okay? So this is another way to do it, right? You can create a function, and then we can call the function later. Let me see if he calls the function later here. Does he do it? Styles, here, right here. See how background.styles black, right there? Styles are being passed down. Styles black was a black or white, remember? Was configured to take in this, see that? And so you can configure it to do that. So styles like this are robust. They allow you to incorporate JavaScript functionality and evaluate certain things within the object itself. Okay, so the object itself allows you to do the evaluations, right? And you can use functions to go ahead and do that, right? So here I'm just saying whatever it is, if it's true, like I can pass in a value here and then I'll know, okay? So I wonder if I could have done that with this. And if I say, let me just take a look here. Opacity is equal to this, so maybe value is equal to 0. We could do that, and then we could have passed in a specific value, right? So in the end, if we wanted to return this color, we could have done if value, right? Whatever value is, and then we could have returned one of two of these colors, right? So return red or green, but now we would need to call that. So in here, I think I would have to do styles dots. Let me just see where he did it. Yeah. Here we actually have to call it. So I would have to create an object and call those properties. You see that? I would have to go down here and actually take all of these things and stick them in here. Instead of doing my styles, we would have to do something like this. Let me say double up, and then I would have to take these, put them in here. Okay. I'm just going to put this on the next line so I can clearly see what's happening. And then we could have done, right? He's doing black here because he created styles, right? Okay. So I could say my styles. So instead of doing this right now, right? Just do this. We could say color is my styles, right? Dot color. And then we could pass it in a value, right? And the value that we'd want to pass in, what if we passed in, I'm just going to say, what if we passed in a value of 1? Right? See how it turns to red? Okay. So if it's true, do red. Right? If I change this to 0, that would be false. And then it's green. See how we can dynamically change those values? We create a function here. We could pass it something, right? Or anything that's greater than 0, right? We could say here that right from the default, it's, green, but every time you do this and you add this number, that could go higher. So we could say now, let me see if we do this. Props dot click, right? Clicks, right? Is it not going to do it? Let me see. Props dot clicks. All right. Boom. You see how it changed to red? Okay. The fact that I reset it, look, reset sets it to green. Clicking on any one of these sets it to red. Okay. So what you're going to see out there is a combination of CSS, natural CSS, in CSS files. Then you're going to see the next iteration of someone's that's like, you know what? I want to do some evaluation of CSS within the JavaScript. I want to somehow abandon this process altogether. I don't want to do this anymore. I really don't. I want to do this, okay? It does allow for more logic. You could have done the same thing in CSS where I would have had a class of red and a class of green and run some logic. If it's this, return the class name of red or return the class name of green and then assigned it here as a class name. That would have been the other way to do it, okay? I just want you to see that these inline styles here kind of allow you that flexibility to run JavaScript code, create functions that'll do things, okay? So it is kind of robust in that fashion that we can do just that, all right? Now, one other way, as we're doing this, right? I mean, we could take all of these styles. So I have styles here. I have light, right? So light is this particular light. And if I go to light here, we see that there's a class name of light. Once again, I could say, you know, const styles is equal to, and then take it, right? I get rid of the light here. I'm going to get rid of that. Okay. And then, once again, I can't do just with like that. I'd have to put them in quotes, comma, right? Height, single quote, comma. Border radius would have to be border radius, camel case, single quote, comma. This would be a comma, and then black would need to be single quote, and that works. We're back to it working. Now I'm going to go to styles and get rid of it and just comment this out so we don't even see it in action. Now we don't even see the circle. I'm going to go back to light, and here I don't need the class name anymore. Like that almost becomes irrelevant right now, right? I don't need class name. What I need is to add, here I put style background color of color, right? And right here, we could have run this logic, this same logic, right? That is here, could be up here, right? So maybe we could do that. Do a comma, get rid of this, get rid of that. And we have props.color. So whatever color comes in, that's what it should be. And then we could possibly just run styles, right? Styles is equal to styles. Then we should have it. Right? And now it still works, right? So we see the advantage of this. Like, what do you think are the advantages of doing it this way? Does anyone have an idea of like why we'd opt to do it this way? Does it feel like there's...
You could use the same component over and over again by just passing in individual style changes as props. You could even create a props object that contains a lot of the styles you would want back and forth again.
Yep. Yeah, Joey, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to say it kind of allows, in a business sense, you could probably operate in silos and not really need to talk to each other much because you're sort of isolating your work into one component or to one area.
Mm-hmm. And in the end, like components are, so in the article that I'm writing, right, one of the things that I'm actually kind of building this out and making it responsive. Okay, so the intent is to build out this little Mars side and make it responsive. Now, the one thing that I do point out is that components were meant to be, with all intent and purpose, reusable. They were meant to be reusable, right? You create components to structure your app, but at the end of the day, as you develop more apps, you're going to say, hey, I need a form. That form looks identical to the form that we just added to the previous 3 apps. Why don't we create a component that has all of that HTML and logic and has all the CSS? So it itself can be given to anyone, and we know that that won't interfere with any other CSS that they might have written. Right? Because although these files are really light on the CSS, there could be a lot of stuff in here that when you import other components that have those DOM elements, that have those class names, all of a sudden stuff's going crazy. Things are inheriting styles. I mean, if you ever used Bootstrap or you imported the Bootstrap CSS, all of a sudden you start seeing things change. And you're like, wait a second, I didn't give it those styles. No, you didn't. Bootstrap did. Bootstrap has a CSS file that's thousands of lines long with the intent and purpose of covering all of the bases. But that's not what we're trying to do here. Okay, so when you're doing it, you want to think reusability. And so creating a CSS file makes it semi-reusable, right? As long as I can export control and control CSS together and give that to you as one folder and you import it, well, then all the CSS is located there, right? If I do import it, that means anything that control renders will also now be in its scope of inheriting that kind of CSS. This it won't. This CSS now is limited solely to this controls thing. No inheritance for the child object, nothing. We're targeting this particular thing itself, okay? And in the world of like HTML and CSS, when I teach front-end development and we go through the different ways of doing CSS, when we get to inline styles, which is what this is, I always tell them, don't do it. Don't ever do inline styles, because then what you're doing is you're putting CSS into the HTML, and as a developer, now I have to look through HTML to find the CSS when I should be looking in a file. But that has changed, React has changed everything. Now we can just put it in here, and now this control is freely given to whomever, with the understanding that you need to pass it a number, and that number needs to be called clicks. If you pass me anything that doesn't have clicks, or you don't pass me clicks, you might break this whole component. So there is some, prerequisites for you walking down this road. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. And it can get...
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
Line 20, what syntax is that called? Is that JavaScript?
Yeah, this is just JavaScript. This is really just an object. And objects can contain methods, really. And so this is just a method. We're saying like color becomes itself a function, right? So anytime a method is a function attached to an object. That's all it is. That's its underlying name. When we were doing classes, we would create our own methods when we were doing class-based components, right? Component did mount, that's a method, right? That's a lifecycle method. When we got to using just class-based functional components like this, we created something like this, right? This is a method. And this method, if called and passed this particular value, runs this code. And this is the same thing. This is a key, and that key renders a function, an anonymous function in this instance. Okay? That takes in, and we're setting this to just to be a default value of 0. It's set to be 0.
I just never saw the question mark, value, question mark, red. Or...
Oh, I got you. This syntax here is just a ternary operator. A ternary operator is another way of doing like an if-else statement. Like we could have written this something like, I guess we could have written this like, let me just take this, comment it out. And we could have written it even like this. So as a ternary operator, could have said something like if, value, if it's true, then, we would say return, right, red. And then we could have the else statement, else, return, green, something like that.
Okay.
I think that'll work.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a short.
Yeah, you're going to see ternary operators everywhere. React always, or developers are almost always going to use this when you're just evaluating 2 values. You can extend this to keep evaluating, but then it's a ternary that renders another ternary that renders another. It's like these nested ternaries can get really funky. So we would see it like this, okay?
Cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Sweet. So let me deal with the to-do list. I just wanted to give you just a little bit of hands-on. This isn't going to be a huge lab. Oh, snap. That's not supposed to happen. Let's see what happens. All right, here's a to-do list, right? And so the to-do list has styles, lots of styles, right? So this has, I don't know, almost 100 lines of styles for a really simple to-do list, right? Okay. So what of this to-do list could you pull out and add directly? Like what of these styling elements could you pull out and configure directly inside of the app? Okay. What I want you to do is just spend, maybe like 10 minutes doing just that. What in here, when you look at a class name like to-do app, and I go back to styles, here's to-do app, right? And if I wanted to take to-do app and apply it, I'll just kind of walk you through what it is I expect you to do. There's no like, this is more like a find the CSS. You see the class name, find the CSS, and then do the inline styles. If I go back to app, I can say here, I can say const, I don't know, to do app, styles, right, is equal to that. I get rid of the to-do class, I get rid of this, and then I just have these. I can't do box sizing like that, has to be like that. And then I need to add single quotes, right, comma. Can't be just a width, has to be that, right? We need to have single quotes around this, comma. Text align needs to be text align, camel case. Border radius, camel case, okay? And then box shadow also, camel case. Box shadow, single quote, single quote. You can use double quotes. I'm just using single quotes here. What did I do wrong? Unexpected.
936. Got a comma.
Oh, I need the comma. Yeah, good looking out. Right? So now I have this. I can go back here. I can comment this out. I don't necessarily need that. Right? Didn't really look like it changed much of our styling there at all, to be honest. And if I go back here, and instead of doing class name, I can get rid of that, and I can just do style is equal to, and then just do to-do app styles, right? To-do app styles, okay? And it should apply whatever styles that we are applying here. It doesn't seem to be that much. I mean, it's saying width, right? I think, what if I increase this width to maybe be 600 so I could see something? Yeah, so it did increase a little bit. There's margin, there's text align center, right? So really all I want you to do is just practice that for a little bit, all right? Pull out some of the styles. I'm not gonna tell you what styles, but the next thing I would start with is maybe the header. I have the header, here's the header. Maybe do it with the header also, right? Where's the header? Header's in here someplace, right? Do we have the header? Right, here's the form, here's the H1. Maybe do it with the H1. Here's the header, here's the H1. Okay, just want you to spend about 10 minutes. I just want to make sure that you understand the camel case, the single quotes. When you see it, you know how to do it. Okay, I'm going to Slack it out. SAS, yeah, and Abdul just Slacked that. Has anyone worked with SAS or works with SAS on a regular basis? Okay, so SAS is like the cracked up version of CSS. It's like super amazing. It allows you to do a lot. I haven't really worked with it as much as I wanted to work with it, but it really allows you to do a lot. And I can't even make the assumption that what we're doing right now would be a good replacement for SAS. Because SAS allows you to even do looping constructs and run logic within the CSS. So I can't say that this would replace it completely, right? This just aggregates this content into itself, okay? So I slacked it out. I'm just gonna give you about 10 minutes. Do whatever, look at the CSS, pull out, once again, I would just pull out the header and try doing the header, and then maybe the H1 in the header. Just give them separate styles, play around with that for a few minutes so that at least you can say that you know how to do it, okay? Is that cool? Just a couple of minutes. I'm gonna say maybe no more than like 10 minutes, okay? pick a couple of components, do it. I won't create any breakout rooms. I'm just going to give you some time to do it. It's 8:47, so we'll go to about 8:57. Okay, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll jump into style components. Okay. We're all back. Okay. I don't, I'll leave it open if there was anyone who did anything unique, wanted to share it. If not, once again, it was a matter of kind of just copying and pasting and making some changes, right? I don't think anything else would have needed to be done there. One last thing, just to show you how to do that in inline styles. Let me see this. So this was as part of the article while I was writing inline styles. You can even select this out. You can see things will get more complicated, but this particular application in the header, right? So basically, what I'm doing is this, just for the sake of doing responsive design. One thing to demo for the article is just a matter of showing. Let me move this down here. Just the navigation up here. This is really all for the article, for the sake of the article. That's all I'm doing. So you see the nav with the little search bar, and then anything that's tablet or below, you won't see it, right? That's it. This also, there's some responsive going on over here also, but that's not part of the article. The article is just meant to demo the nav bar, okay? And so with that, when it comes to doing the header, let me see with the header slider, info bow, top nav items. There's a lot of code here, so I can't go through all the code. I'm just really kind of giving you the summation of it, where I actually have two objects. One is show top nav, one is show menu icon. And I'm getting a value in, whether it's show top nav is true or false, whatever it is. If it's true, return flex. I'm doing display flex. I use flexbox all the time, or it'll be set to display none. And then the reverse here. If show icon top nav is true, then display none. Don't show yourself. Otherwise, set it to that. And so if we go here, show nav, show menu icon, show nav and show menu icon, the nav would be the long nav with all the clickable items, and then the hamburger is that. And so I give them these individual styles here in order to do that, okay? So I'm using this. A lot of overkill to do it this way when I was using media queries to do it also. So I have a bunch of media queries that did basically the same thing. Took the thing, changed it based on a media query. And this was fairly easy to do. But then I decided, you know what? Let's go here and use inline styles and JavaScript to do it, okay? And so I needed to query the windows width. We're not going to get into that. I'm just kind of showing you the same implementation. Using inline styles to make those changes to make just one small thing kind of responsive in design, okay? I'm not really sure that that's the best way to do it. It's a lot of overhead for that. Okay. Sweet. So we're finished with that. I'm going to add links to this particular article for building responsive designs. I think I put that in the Trello board as well. So I'm just going to get rid of that for now. Okay. Close. Close. All right. Let's talk about styled components. Okay. So I'm going to take you to the style components site. So the article did have a link to style components that took you to a GitHub repo, but they have documentation on how to use style components. And so what's the motivation behind style components? Like, why are we doing this? It's like, I don't know, we already have inline styles, we can do everything. We have style sheets. Why do we need something else, right? So there's always like, why are you giving me more? Well, style components keep track here. So apart from the improved experience developers are going to have, because it does add a little bit of kind of developer experience, I have to say. But you can style components, keep track of which components are rendered on the page and inject those styles. We're really creating components themselves, literally creating components that have inside of them styles. And so the components themselves would know if they're a div, whether they're a section, or if they're a main, whatever, they're going to know that. And they're going to have their styles too. And then we can call them like normal components. Okay? No class name bugs. No class names. You saw how we were just removing all the class names and just replacing it with inline styles? We don't need class names anymore for these unique things. These things that we gave them class names so we could target them in CSS uniquely, right? That's why I gave a class name. Otherwise, you would use an ID. An ID is meant to be specific to one thing. If you see something have a class name, the insinuation is that this thing should be reused. That's why class names are used. IDs are meant specifically for one thing and one thing only on a particular page. Okay? We can delete the CSS easier. The thing's not there, the CSS isn't being applied, and so I don't have additional CSS on the page. Okay? Simplified dynamic styling. Once again, we can use JavaScript, just like you saw, to dynamically style something, right? Create a function that evaluates things on the fly, right? Normal CSS isn't able to do that, right? All right, forget about these other two. In order to use it, we have to install styled components, right? So I'm going to go to my light levels, and I don't see any styled components here, right? So these are inline styles. You know what? I actually have another one for just style components. I kind of wanted to separate the two. What we did there, I will select this out. So you can have one example of using inline styles and another one using styled components, okay? So the first thing that we need to do, if we want to use styled components, is to add the dependency. So if I click on add dependency and I do styled components, right here, styled components. So I can just do bloop, styled components. Now I have access to styled components. Okay. So like, what the hell does styled components do? All right, well, let's take a look. I install style components, right? So if you were using something like create React app locally, this is how you would do it. We're using the code sandbox, so it just really makes it easier for us to install it. But it would be the same process, right? And then getting started. Okay, easy enough. So if we are going to use style components, we need to import styles, right? So you see how this says styled dot h1 and then these backticks and then a bunch of styles. Normal CSS too, I might add, right? This is font size as normal CSS without single quotes. Text dash align, not text camel case align, center, no single quotes, right? And then a color with something, right? Okay, so for us to use this, we need to import style. That's what we need to do. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to go to one of the components. Suppose I could go back to the controls component. Maybe I had the light buttons. You know, maybe I'm going to do it with the light right here. So I'm going to go here and say import styled from styled components. So it requires an import. This is a third-party library. And in order to use this third-party library, we need to import this particular component, okay? So now that we've imported it, we want to use it. So let's take a look here again. So it looks like, hey, they're creating this thing called title, and it looks like title is being assigned to an H1 element. And then that H1 element is just given specific styling, right? That's really what this looks like. It's just given specific style, okay? So let's go back here. And if we wanted to do this, I'm going to now say const, maybe light is equal to styled dot div backtick. Okay? So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a light component. Okay? A light component, styled components that are styled. Right? Now this light component has some sort of CSS associated with it, so I can go into the style CSS, find the light component. See, this is all the styles that it came with. I can just copy that, go back here, and paste that in. Okay, I'm just going to tab this over. I don't have to make any additional edits to this thing. Before it was a lot of like, oh my God, remove the semicolon, add single quotes around everything, do this as camel case. I don't have to do that, right? And it still is semicolons. Look at this, semicolons themselves, okay? So now that I have this written just like this, right? Light is this. I think the only thing we have is this style right here, which we're going to have to deal with. We will deal with that in a minute. Right now it's just black, right? Background is going to be black. So now what I can do is I can get rid of this. Watch this. Get rid of that. Thing is like, what? You can't do these comments anyway, right? So let me just cut this out. All right. Cut it out. Can't have an empty element, right? That's what it's saying. It sees these two, sees that it's empty. Now I can say light, and look, it's back. I now have a style component, a component that I have dynamically styled. Okay, using this, it's a div. It's truly a div. So if I open this up and we take a look at it, right? I'm going to get rid of this responsive. I will put this onto the right side again. And if I take a look at this element, right? It's a div with a class of some crazy name. Like I didn't create that class. I don't know what that class means. This is style components adding it. They created the thing. They're targeting the thing. They need a way to apply the CSS to the thing. This is how they are doing it, okay? So anytime you see elements that look like this with a class, you have to, you have to be sure that no human being is adding a class like that, okay? No one ever added a class like this. That's coming from someplace else. And that someplace else is coming from here. We created this component. I'm just curious, can I just do a self-closing? Yeah, so it self-closes too. I could have added stuff in it. This self-closes. It's going to go over here, make sure I didn't break anything, right? Refresh, boom, still the same thing.
Is that the same text string?
Oh, I'd have to take a look. I think I saw like ILO or LQ at the end. I think that's what caught my eye in SC, but I don't know if it is. I'd have to refresh and then take a look. I wouldn't get caught up in like the string because I don't think you're ever really going to be referencing that, right? Even up here, I would say up here, but this looks like I didn't add this. This is just the code sandbox, but it looks like, this is what they're doing for CSS. Cool. So we have that. Now, if I click on this though, right? Nothing changes. Okay, nothing changes. I would either assume, oh my God, I broke the thing, right? I'm just going to actually make sure. Here we go. I'm just going to make sure that the thing worked before I made these changes. Right? I want to make sure. Yeah. So it worked before I made the changes, right? I don't want to like apply and be like, it wasn't working before. So I'm going to go, oh, I'm just going to re-add everything, right? Here's light. And we know that we don't need self-closing would do just fine, right? So how do we change the background now to be something else? That would be the question, right? Clicking on this isn't changing anything. It's updating the clicks, but it's not changing the color. So how are we going to do this? Well, let's take a look, right? Let's keep going. Now, you can do it with as many things as you want, as many components as you want. That's fine. And then here, adapting based on props. If props are passed, how do you evaluate, right? And we can use the same kind of like ternary operator here if we needed to, but you can see the construct now is $ curly brace, right? And $ curly brace is something that we would use when we're doing string interpolation, right? When we're doing string interpolation, it would be backticks, and any variables would be rendered using $ curly brace around the variable. So here you can see like it's saying that props, if it's primary, return white. Otherwise, return this color, this other color. And they're showing you the difference here with the buttons. The buttons is they're creating a single button component that contains all of the same styles except for the color. Right? Except for the background color right here. I think also here, right? The color of the font, but the background color is really what stands out here. Okay? Actually, no, the background color and the color, right? And so they're using these interpolations to dynamically change it. Kind of like what we were doing earlier in just plain JavaScript. But this is how they do it. Right? And then what you can have is two buttons here, a button that's normal and a button that's primary. And you can actually even pass in this primary value is what it's doing here. It's seeing what's passed in as props primary as that particular value. Okay? And it's evaluating that. See? This is props, right? We're just giving it a single keyword where it's not like primary is equal to primary. You just do primary, and then it evaluates props.primary, right? If it got something, then it'll be this. If it didn't get something, it'll be that, okay? So let's take a look. Oh. That kind of scared me. All right. So say we want to do that. We want to evaluate this. And we know that it's coming down, right? So the original code, we have like props dot, I'm going to say background color. I almost forgot again. So you know what? I'm going to copy this. I just want to take a look. I forgot what it was. Props dot color. That's what it is. Props dot color. That's what we're looking for, right? So let me go back here. We can leave that. So we can say props dot color, and it's going to give us the color that it was, right? So instead of black, what if we do this? What if we passed in and said, now we can also evaluate this props and say props color, right? There we go. That's easy enough. We don't really have to evaluate. Let's see if this would do it. There you go. Look, it works. We're able to change the color based on what was being passed down. I didn't have to pass in anything this way. I could just still evaluate the color that's being returned, right? Really, I don't need to do any evaluation of anything. Okay, I'm just evaluating what's already being passed down. So I still have access to the props itself. Okay, but I think if we had changed this to be like this, that might have changed things, right? Props.primary. If I change this from this to be props, right? Let's make sure props primary, and then props dot color, right? And it's broken. It's not even working now. Let me just see if I get rid of this, get rid of this. So I think we either have some errors, or I would have to pass in something now that would have props.color.
You have an extra curly braces at the end.
Oh, do I? Okay. Still,
Nope, still doesn't work.
yeah. And I'm looking, once again, I'm just following this, right? Props, curly brace. So it looks like
that's a ternary operator, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but this is a callback function. See, this is an anonymous function. You're passing in something. This is the fat arrow, and then it's running the ternary, and it should be returning something. And ours isn't really returning anything. I just assumed it would return the color by default, unless I need the return keyword, which I don't think so. See if I added that. If I did return, no, because I don't think this props.color is the props color that we think it is. This anonymous function is taking in a props, and I think that props needs to come from here. And I think if I was to do this and say maybe color is equal to, or color is equal to, I'm just going to try this, props. Oh man. Props.color. Let me see if this works. Oh, there we go. Does it work? Oh, look. See? It works. It's a different props. It's not the props that we used just before. This props needs to be passed in. And then this props is the evaluation of this. They are two different things, right? I don't know. I don't think just color, because we have to pass something in. This color value that we are passing in, that we are returning, and I don't even think I need this return anymore. I'm going to get rid of that. I don't think we need that. That was just overkill. There are two different props ideas here. One prop idea, once again, I'll just take this. I'll put that here. And for this one, this props.color right here, this props is the props that's being passed in. That's that props. Okay. Could you export your live variables component and use it in a different Yeah, you can export it too. Okay. You can. That'll make color true. Yep. Or if we did it like this, once again, this way, this color is what's being passed in. This becomes its own self-contained world where we could have called this anything. It didn't have to be called props. So maybe if I change this from prop, I'll just call it prop instead of props, right? I'll comment this out, and let's just take a look and see if this still works. Okay? So don't get confused with the keyword of props that I'm using, because this is just an anonymous function. And that argument name is whatever argument name I decide to give it. I could have called it color.color, to be pretty redundant, right? But this props here is the props that's being passed from up here. So just know that when you see the different syntax, don't get confused. Just know that when you're doing it like this, you're passing in a prop now to the component. This is really a component. This self-contained thing right here is really its own component, and this is how you pass something to that component, okay? This is the way we wanted to go.
Joe,
Yeah.
Can we put text inside the component, and would it render the text like?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if we had text, right? Let me see. I think the color might be black. So let me see if I did color, I don't know, white. Yeah, see the text? You can do it. If you don't want to add text, that's why I would say, like, if you didn't want to add text, then you could just do that, right? I think we had that working. Let me get rid of this. I think that's what's breaking it, maybe. No, this was just working before. Oh, right? This was just working a moment ago.
Props.color needs to be in the brackets, right?
Oh, let me see.
With the $sign?
With the $sign, yeah.
Did it? I don't. Oh, yeah, because it's a variable. There we go. Okay. So if you don't need to include additional text inside of the component, then all you have to do is do single, a normal component, right? This isn't a component that wraps around another component.
Could you put a different component inside this stylized component so that each of the children have the same styles?
So inside of this?
Inside of light. So could
light right.
Another, okay.
Yeah, you could. I mean, you could do something like, I don't know, like const text is equal to styled dot, I don't know, h1. Make it really big. Boom, boom. We could say, I don't know, color is, I don't know, white, right? So we could at least see it. Okay. And then here, right? So I'll have light, and inside of light, I think all we have to do is do text, right? And then just say, I don't know, hello, give it something, boom. See? So you can nest these components and give them text. And so what you're going to start to see here is we could have at any point in time created a component called light and imported that component, right? I mean, that's really what we've always been doing, like breaking things down further and further and further into their smallest reusable UI. So we could have at some point in time gone up here and said, import light from the light component, right? I mean, we already have a light component, right? We could have done that. Or big circle, call it big circle, whatever you want to call it. We could have imported. So when you see this, you're not going to know that that is, by default, a higher level component, right? You're not going to know that. You're just going to be like, oh, I guess there's a light component that they're importing, but this thing wraps around the thing, and I usually don't do that, right? I usually don't wrap components around other components. Just is not something you usually do. We haven't done it, right? For the most part, we've done it with elements. A main has an opening and a closing. Section has an opening and a closing. H1, normal DOM elements have that. We haven't really gone out of our way. The only time we've done that is with like router and styled higher order components, right? I think in this, I don't have it, but one of them had the higher order components where, oh, this is it, right? No, this isn't it. The higher order components were repassed down in the to-do list. Actually, I think the to-do list does have a higher order component. Here, I think I included this in here because we had a create context. And you see how we passed and we had this opening and closing, and it wrapped around the to-do list item. I don't know if anyone remembers use context, but that seems like forever ago if you had to implement it. Does anybody remember what the use context was for? What was the purpose of use context? Anyone?
It lets you pass state without directly passing it to each child component. You can use context, and then there's something you do when you want to use the context that basically lets you modify state for the parent component, or nth ancestor component, if you will.
Yes, that's exactly it. So what we did was here you pass down the provider, and then the child element consumed it. And so whatever child element, doing it like this means that the to-do list could have 100 children that have children that have children, right? This thing could go down in a sequence of 100 nested children. And I could send something from here all the way to the last child using this method and bypass all of the other children. They would never even know something's being passed down because I'm not passing something down. I'm actually making it available to them when they decide they want to use it. They would have to import it. I think we did this, let me see, in to-do list, I think we might have, yeah. We imported it here, handle remove item, and then we used it. And then we used context, and we're able to actually grab the function that was passed down, okay? Once again, did this, 2 weeks ago. I'm just kind of throwing it in there because you did use, use reducer, you did use context. These are new concepts. So as you start working on your app, don't get complicated with like building out so much functionality. Try to implement some of the functionality that you learned, but at the most basic level. Pass a function. Say that you understand use context. Use reducer so that you can bounce around between two different values. It doesn't have to be complex. I just kind of want to make sure that you understand it. All right. So I'm going to go back to light levels. So we have an idea, right? Style components, pretty easy, not too complicated, right? Let's go back tab. Let's see if there's anything else in here. There's controls we could possibly do, right? There's the text. So if I go to controls, here we go. We have the light button, here's controls. And so I could take controls and possibly do the same thing, right? Here's a class name of controls. These are the controls. And so if I go into CSS and I look for something like, there's only a margin here. I mean, it's not a whole lot for us to do. Say I got rid of the margin, right? All that does is like push them up a little bit, right? Not a big deal. But if I go into controls and I say const controls, what we first have to do? We first have to import styled from style components, right? We need that. That's the first thing we need to do. Now that I have it, I can go down here and say const controls is equal to styled, right? And what is it? It's a div, all right? All right, I'm just reproducing what this is. It's just a div that renders that. I could then paste in the CSS, right? That's all. Here's the CSS, not a lot going on there. Okay, so now I have a controls component, right? A style component. Now what I can do is maybe get rid of this. I do have light buttons, and I'm going to have to render all of the light buttons. But what if I got rid of this? Well, now we're going to lose all our controls. Oh, no. I want to get back to controls. Controls. And look, I get back the controls, right? I rendered those elements again, and this everything still should work, right? I'm going to get rid of that text hello. That's driving me crazy. That was just to prove the point, right? So style components aren't really super crazy, right? I mean, they're pretty intuitive. At their most basic level, we can use them, and we can add that logic, okay? Here's a really cool, neat thing, though, too, with style components. So they've created two buttons. Now, we saw before, we could have used the conditional logic, right? So in this preview example, we use some ternary logic here to be like, oh, if it's this, do this, else do this. And so we could have two buttons, really, same buttons, just change their background and font color based on this ternary operator, right? Well, what if you didn't want to do that? What if you didn't want to do a ternary operator? What if you wanted to do this? I'm going to create the styling for a button, right? Every button has this style, and then I'm going to take that style and inherit all of that style and add my own unique styles that override it. Okay? So in this instance, they're creating a new button, tomato button, using styled. The difference between the styled here and the styled here, this was dot button that creates a component. This is inheriting the actual component that you previously created. We're going to inherit all those properties, and then we are going to overwrite these two properties. That's really what we're doing. We're overriding those two properties. And then you would render out the normal button and then the tomato button. Okay? So there's ways to inherit the styles, extend the styles, right? And they continue to do that down here too, right? Style button, they're doing it again. They're getting the styles. So it's pretty cool what you can do with style components, no? Right? Pretty cool stuff. And so if you wanted to just get a little bit of practice in here, style components, once again, I just forked the same to-do list so that you would at least have the previous one as something you can continue to work on, and this one where they didn't conflict. So here, what could we do to create some style components? I don't know. I would say maybe an app. I'm just going to take a look in app, see what we have. So app has a header and an H1. You can create the style components there also for this, right? First thing that you need to do is import style components. So I would have to go here and do styled components and import the library. Okay, now that I have the library, we can go ahead and import M1P styled from style components. Okay, and then we can create this header element here. Okay, we can say const header is equal to styled dot header, right? Header is a natural DOM element, right? Header is a DOM element. I mean, here we're saying a div of class name header, but header in itself is a DOM element. So there's no reason why. I don't think if we swap these two that would really change anything, and we would be actually adding a header instead of a class name of header. Okay, and now I have to go take a look. Let me see. Header in CSS has this style, right? These are the styles for the header, okay? So if I comment that out, our header just changed colors. We go back in here, and I paste those styles. Paste them back in. All right, just gonna do this, Looks good. I just now need to replace this header here with header. Take this, and it should, well, doesn't look like it's doing everything. Maybe it is a different header.
H1 as well.
Oh yeah, so we have to do the H1, but I almost feel like, let me go back. Okay, here, right? I'm gonna go back to CSS. I just wanna make sure that I'm not doing anything wrong here. Here's the CSS. That's what it should look like, right? So the fact that in our header here,
Oh, I think I get it. It's because you removed the class name and it was looking for the H1 with the class name.
Ah, that's right. That's right. So here, H1 header. That's why. We have a class name of H1 header, and it can't seem to find that H1 header. That's what's happening. So we'd have to figure out, I mean, we still have a header component. So I think in here, if I did this, if I went this route, let's just do this. Let's test this out. If I did do header here, right? And I did do this, right? Let's say I did that. Then in CSS, if I wanted to do this, otherwise I would just do the H1, right? Which is probably what we should do. If I wanted to, then I would be changing this from header to a header element, right? Because now it's an element, it's not a class. And the dot represents that it's a class name. No dot represents that it's a natural DOM element, okay? So just say I left it like that and I went here, I would do the same thing, like const You know, I think we saw a call title before, right? So maybe we'll just call it title is equal to styled dot h1, right? Add all those styles, just tab it over, and then over here, to-do list becomes title to-do list. Okay, there we go. And then we have it. Now, you can also, and I know Abdul just posted it, you can nest styles like SAS does. So I think, does that mean we can do something like H1, something like that? I think we might be able to do this. Is that the right syntax? Am I doing it right, Abdul? I'm just trying to see. SAS allows you to nest styles. So I think this is us nesting the styles. So I want to go here and just do.
Yeah, that should work.
Yeah, that should work. But I still, oh yeah. So H1, right? H1 to-do list, right? Let's see. There you go. You see that? That's an example of what SAS does. It allows you to nest styles inside of other styles. So now, once again, in SAS, I would have done it in the CSS file, but in style components, I could do it this way, okay? And so I can inherit other styles instead of creating its own style component, which I might do anyway, you know? It's either way. Cool. Is anybody looking to like use style components in their project at this point? Yes, maybe. I don't know.
Not at this point, but this is pretty neat.
It is pretty neat, right? Yeah, there's almost times I want to introduce style components like early on, just like a couple of days in, like let's do style components, but I think like it's just too much. But I think when you see the functionality, you see how it can be packaged and reused. And there's so much more. Like we just kind of touched the surface. There's a whole advanced section for it and adding themes and other stuff. Like I haven't worked with it as much as I want to, but there's a lot of other advanced material that you can do with it as well. Okay. We don't have time to like cover everything, but sweet. So, I know we don't really have, wasn't a little lab time. I was only going to give you like maybe 10 or 15 minutes because we spent a lot of time just showing it off. Any questions about style components? Any questions about the project in general or anything in general? Do you have any concerns about your project?
I have the problem with the Firebase.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna take a look at yours. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm gonna take a look at that. I did quickly earlier, but I wasn't able to solve it.
I've got a weird issue where I can't seem, the API call looks good, it produces a URL that works, and I can click on it and it gives me something, but when I actually go through and set it to response, I don't get anything, and no console logs after that point show me anything after that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'll post it to questions.
Post it in questions, because I also know, I'm just gonna maybe take a look at yours real quick. Yoon had this really unique scenario here where we have an app, and app is using effect, and it's grabbing the database, right? And we should see something here, right? We should see something like snapshot. We should see something. But say I go here, I expand it, and I go here. Now there's no real, just all these dev tools, but there's no real console log. So I'm going to do this. Hey, it's use effect, right? Use effect should run at least once, right? Inside use effect, right? If we're inside use effect, that should run one time. So my question is, why doesn't it run one time? There's no console log here. I don't see anything, and yet I don't know. I don't see any errors. I don't see anything that's indicating that this thing, although I don't actually see any DOM elements either. So now I'm just taking a look. Here's the root. So the root isn't being mounted. My next conclusion was this. I don't see, here's ID of root, right? And here's your app, and the app looks like it's rendering main and header, and it is. But at the same time, this is just really weird because the header has something, right? And now I'm not seeing anything here. I don't see any elements. But I do see the two elements here. Isn't that a little strange? I can't really explain it.
I did put a bootstrap link in the
Okay.
so
I just don't see it here, though. So you know what? I don't see your header here. That's just what's kind of, it's got me. I don't see the header. I see it here. Here's the logo, right?
Yeah.
I went to DevTools here, right? And I pulled this over. I should see, I could see just, it's not gonna let me see it. There we go. I'm gonna move this onto the bottom. If I go here, I see the logo. So I can click on the logo, and I see you have this nav, you have an ID of root. But when I go here, it doesn't look like this thing has anything. You see what I'm saying? It's just a weird thing. So I'm not sure why we don't see it, but we're in use effect. This is the weirdest thing I've really seen, I gotta be honest. Opening up in live mode, I don't see anything. Opening it up here, I see inside use effect. But I don't see this running. So unless this doesn't run because there's nothing there, I don't know. Maybe there's nothing in the dashboard to run. I don't really know.
so inside the ref method,
yep,
for the argument, do I put the nickname of the app or the first, I guess?
This would be the table, right?
Table itself, yeah. Right?
Let me go back because off the top of my head, it's really hard to be like, this is exactly what it needs to be. I'm going back to just, I think this one, right? Let me see. Was it this that we did the import? We did the database, yeah. So messages here references the database table. So there's a table called messages. And I'm grabbing that table of messages, and anything that changes within messages, that's what I'm grabbing. So I feel like it should be grabbing something. I feel like it should be. But once again, the only other way to do that would be to, on my side, console log, this is, snapshot, and say snapshot, and just see if anything is produced, right? So I'm going to clear this out, and I will just refresh this once. And I think I should see stuff because I have messages, right? Here we go. This is snapshot, and I have the database. So I don't know why yours isn't running. Like, unless it's because I have messages and you don't have any messages, I don't know. I have to take a look and see. Take a look a little further. If anyone has any ideas, Cool. I see, I think, Gustavo, you had a question about just lat long.
Yeah, I have an API call that runs based off of looking at if the user selects if they click on find me, it will reset found lat long to values, and then it will run this API call. And the first 3 lines all run, but as soon as it starts running the actual API call, it gives me nothing in response, and I get nothing after that.
Got it. Element is, I've expected a string to build a class function, but got an object. All right. So it does look like at some point in time you're trying to put an object on the screen and not a string value of something.
I don't have that error.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening. Why I'm getting some wacky errors here. Yeah. I don't know. That's what I'm getting. Check, and it looks like it's the home method. I can take a look at it later. I wanted to see if I could quickly figure it out, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able. I'd have to work through this error first. But I'll take a look, and maybe somebody else in the class too. If they wanted to take a look, they could see too. Okay. Let me just go over the homework. So if you haven't already done so, and it looks like a lot have not, add a link to your final project in the homework sheet. The homework sheet has a column for the kind of initial build. From the feedback from the poll earlier, it looks like people aren't where they want to be, but wherever you are, we'll give you till like Thursday to do it. Thursday, you're going to be meeting with us, me or Abdul, so you're going to have to show us something. So we'll give you until Thursday to populate it, but we need to have something in there to mark the homework as complete for that day, right? If there's nothing in there, you get marked as incomplete. And you need an 80% completion rate for your homework. Otherwise, you aren't eligible for the certificate of completion. Okay, so we need to make sure everyone's at that stage. So just give me something. Doesn't have to be the final. Give me a basic thing, and then we're going to meet with you anyway. And then just, continue to work on your project. That's your true homework.
Hey, Joe, I think the confusion might be there was the projects one-on-one tab where a lot of us put our projects. I didn't even realize I had to put it in the other one.
Oh, so when we met with everyone, I wanted to have like the repo there. I know what you're saying. So that was, if I go to the homework, not this homework. I go to this one and we go to our homework sheet. I know we had, here was our project one-on-ones, and you put the code sandbox links there. Yes. I think I only added this here just so that we could keep track. If you were doing an initial build and then you forked it and you had another build, whatever the builds were, if they're the same builds, then they'll be the same builds. I'm just using this also to say they submitted it on this, as part of this homework assignment. That's really it. If it's going to be the same thing, just copy paste it. Cool. Awesome, and we'll take a look. So, all right, yeah, looks like 10 o'clock. I will Slack out the exit tickets, and yeah, Slack. Once again, if you are having issues with the code pens, by all means, Slack me the code pens. I will try to take a look. Gustavo, I will look at yours, and I'll try to figure out what's happening with yours. Okay.
Thank you.
You got it.
Joe, are we signing up for a time, or are we just all showing up for the next class and then we'll figure out what time to meet with
Yeah, I'm going to just assign everyone a time. I'm going to take the same approach we did last time. Just assign everyone a time and jump into class. That's project time. And then I'll jump into our breakout rooms. I have to put everyone in breakout rooms anyway.
Cool.
Cool. All righty. Sound good? Okay. Then have a good night, and catch everyone on Thursday.
Thank you.
You got it.